This is the story of THY, or what we know today as Turkish Airlines, the airline that made Turkey proud and then broke it. It all started back in 1933, when the State Airlines Administration was founded. They started off slow with just 5 planes, flying between Istanbul and Ankara, but everything changed after World War II. By the late 40s, they had grown to over 20 planes and were already becoming a major player in the region. Throughout the 50s and 60s, they continued to modernize their fleet and expand their network, venturing into Europe and the Middle East. And by the end of the 60s, they even had routes to Asia. In 1962, they became a full-fledged member of IATA, or the International Air Transport Association, officially making them a modern international airline. The 70s and 80s were THY's golden age. The company was thriving, had a modern fleet, and was profitable. And this wasn't lost on the Turkish people, who saw their airline not just as a way to travel, but as a symbol of their country's pride. But behind the scenes, cracks were beginning to show. The management was incompetent and corrupt. Safety standards were slipping, and by the 90s, the airline was in sharp decline. In 1991, they experienced a near bankruptcy. This forced the government to step in and inject $400 million into the airline to keep it afloat. But this was only a temporary fix. The deep-rooted problems still remained. Over the next few years, the situation got worse. There were multiple accidents, and the airline safety record was called into question. The public was losing confidence in THY, and it seemed like the once great airline was headed for disaster. But the story doesn't end there. This is a tale of 2 airlines. We've covered the first part of the story, but now it is time to talk about how they fixed it and took the company to new heights. Make sure to watch till the end, because the second part is equally impressive. So let's get right into it. In the early 2000s, THY was in crisis mode. They were losing money, had a bad reputation, and the competition was fierce. But instead of throwing more money at the problem, the government decided to do something bold, completely overhaul the company. In 2001, the Turkish government brought in a new CEO, a man named THY. He came from a humble background. He worked his way up through the ranks and knew every aspect of the airline business. He was the perfect man for the job. His first order of business was to cut costs. He did this by getting rid of unprofitable routes, negotiating better deals with suppliers, and investing in new technology. This helped the airline to streamline its operations and make better use of its resources. But he didn't stop there. He also knew that the airline's reputation was in tatters and that it needed to be rebuilt. So he invested heavily in safety measures, upgraded equipment, and trained staff to international standards. And it worked. The airline slowly began to turn around. It became profitable, and people started to take notice. The media began to write positive stories about the company, and passengers started to choose THY over the competition. Bader took the company to new heights. They became the largest airline in the region and a major player on the world stage. Under his leadership, THY became a shining example of how a struggling company could turn itself around. But this success didn't come easy. Bader had to overcome a lot of challenges along the way. He had to deal with a skeptical public, a tough economic environment, and a lot of internal resistance, but he never gave up. He was determined to make THY the best airline in the world. In 2007, Time magazine named him one of the 100 most influential people in the world. That same year, he received the prestigious Wings Club Award for Lifetime Achievement in Aviation. He was a true aviation legend. Sadly, he passed away in 2010, but his legacy lives on through the company he built. THY was growing fast. They had a solid foundation and were expanding into new markets. But something was missing. They were trying to be everything to everyone, and in the process, they were losing their focus. In 2008, they flew to over 180 destinations. They had a fleet of over 270 aircraft and were still growing, but this rapid expansion came with a cost. As they ventured into new markets, they faced intense competition. For example, in the US, they were up against giants like United and Delta. In Europe, they were competing with Lufthansa and Air France. And in Asia, they were facing stiff competition from Emirates and Qatar. To make matters worse, the global economy was in a downturn. People were tightening their belts and weren't traveling as much. This meant that THY had to fight harder than ever before to stay afloat. In addition to this external pressure, they were also facing some internal challenges. The company was becoming too big for its own good. They had a complex network of routes and a large fleet of aircraft. This made it difficult to manage and operate efficiently. On top of this, they had a shortage of skilled workers. As they expanded into new markets, they needed to hire a lot of new people, but they couldn't find enough qualified candidates. This put a lot of strain on the existing staff, and it was unsustainable in the long run. Despite these challenges, THY was still growing, but it was clear that something had to change. They needed to find a way to become more efficient and focus on their core business. This is when the government stepped in again. They knew that THY was in trouble, and they didn't want to see the national airline fail. So they brought in a new management team to help turn the company around. They implemented a number of changes. First, they simplified the network of routes and focused on their most profitable markets. They also invested in new technology to improve efficiency and reduce costs. In addition to these operational changes, they also worked hard to improve the company's image. They launched a new marketing campaign to promote THY as a modern, dynamic, and customer-focused airline. They also worked hard to improve customer service and make the flying experience more enjoyable. These changes were tough at first. A lot of employees resisted the changes, and some customers were unhappy with the new direction of the company. But in the long run, they were necessary if THY was going to survive. Slowly but surely, things began to turn around. The company became more efficient and profitable, and the brand started to shine again. Finally, in 2009, they made the decision to rebrand the company. They changed their logo, their website, and their uniforms. They wanted to send a clear message that THY was a new airline. It was a risky move, but it paid off. Today, THY is one of the most successful airlines in the world. They are the largest airline in Turkey and the Middle East, and they fly to more destinations than any other airline. In conclusion, THY is a story of two companies. The first THY was a government-run airline that was focused on providing service to the Turkish people, while the second THY is a customer-focused low-cost carrier that competes with the best in the industry. The turnaround of THY is a remarkable achievement. What sets this story apart is the fact that THY was able to reinvent itself without losing sight of its core values. Despite the turbulence, THY has emerged as a stronger, more resilient airline that is well positioned for success in the years to come.